trail left from the American Civil War was one of destruction. In much of the South, homes were burned, fields lay waste, and factories leveled. The Southerners regarded the 12 years after the war as the tragic era. For many, it was a time to start anew. The end of the American Civil War brought to the South a staggering task. They had to reappraise their situation and begin anew. Their Confederate money was worthless. The 4 million African slaves, once the valuable property of the planters, were now freed. President Lincoln had a plan to peacefully bring the 11 Confederate states back into the Union. His plan was called Reconstruction. The Reconstruction period lasted from 1865 to 1877 and proved to be a difficult time for many. In the beginning of Reconstruction, President Lincoln's plan allowed former Confederates to be pardoned when they took the oath of allegiance to the Constitution.
I, Stephen Mason, do solemnly swear, in presence of Almighty God, that I will henceforth faithfully support, protect, and defend the Constitution.
When enough people in their state took the oath, then that state could return to the Union and participate in the government. Under Lincoln's plan, blacks could not take the oath, vote, or hold office. On the morning of April 14th, 1865, Lincoln continued his work on the difficult problems of Reconstruction. He once told a reporter,
"I've made up my mind that if someone wants to kill me, he will do it."
That evening, while watching a play at the Ford's Theater, Washington, D.C., Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head and killed by his assassin, John Wilkes Booth. And so, this simple man of compassion, whose grand purpose was to keep the nation united, was laid to rest. As the country mourned over its fallen leader, Vice President Andrew Johnson quickly stepped in and took over the powers of the presidency. He, too, wanted to help the people of the South and continued with most of Lincoln's Reconstruction plans. Johnson soon pardoned the Confederates to help them and their states regain their powers in government. He declared that under the Constitution, they were never separated from the Union and that their legal rights should not be denied. Yet those in Congress questioned.
Gentlemen, isn't the President's plan too easy on the South? It must not be forgotten that the people of these Confederate states, without just cause, rose in rebellion against the United States. They destroyed national forts, arsenals, dockyards, and waged a 4-year war against our government. And now, our illustrious President Johnson would let these former Confederates gain power once again in the South. Isn't this the ultimate treason? It is Congress who should have the power to reconstruct the South, not the President.
Northerners' worst fears were that the former Confederates were attempting to bring back slavery. For example, many planters needed workers on their land. Often, blacks were offered the job to farm the planters' land in exchange for a small share of the harvested crop. This type of work was called sharecropping. Unfortunately, many planters often deceived the black workers and confined them to one plantation, much as slavery had done. In the South, from 1865 to 1866, laws called the Black Codes were made specifically to keep blacks from being free. Many communities required blacks to be off the streets by a specified hour. Other communities required special permission from their employer to enter a town. And often, blacks were not allowed to handle firearms or other weapons. The Black Codes passed by the Southerners convinced the radical Republicans in Congress that the Lincoln-Johnson plan did not help blacks. Congress challenged the president's policy and promoted their own Reconstruction laws. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, prohibiting slavery in the United States. This was a primary benefit gained by the terrible price of the Civil War. In 1866, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing federal citizenship to blacks.
This law declares that no state shall deprive any person of rights of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Overall, the members of Congress believed that their Reconstruction plan, not the president's, could solve the problems of the South. Therefore, public agencies were formed and placed in the South so to eliminate the injustices toward blacks and poor whites. One particular agency, known as the Freedmen's Bureau, helped people from both races with education by setting up schools and hiring teachers from northern states. Regrettably, not all were in agreement of its cause.
But I do not understand this question.
Well, which one? Let's take a look here.
That one.
Oh, okay, let me see. Well, you just...
Do you not know that you are
Object of
educating the
compliment
colored
will be-
youth above their business?
Colonel Johnson, welcome. Forgive me, but what did you say?
Miss Clifton, I said, do you not know that you're destroying these Negro children?
Why, my friend, do you think that? Do you not understand that the importance of education is to prevent these people from beggary and dependence?
That colored child will be too proud to work.
Understand, sir. This child's parents, like so many other Negro parents, see the opportunity in these schools. We plan on providing 4,000 schools, not only for the Negroes, but for your poor whites as well.
That is hard to believe.
And why is that so hard to believe? Why shouldn't the former slaves enjoy their newfound freedom? Finally, they're able to travel, worship, earn a living. Unfortunately, they're not finding as much work as before the war, but the Freedmen's Bureau is trying to help.
Pardon me, miss, but the Bureau is a curse. Virtually a foreign government forced upon us. Yankee soldiers occupy our cities when we are able to have order here without them. Your President Johnson agrees on this deplorable issue.
Leave, Yankee scum! You're interfering with our affairs. We don't need your kind around here.
Are you hurt?
No, I'm obliged to you, sir. Are you okay? Are you all right? Wow.
As you all know, I condemn those drunken and lawless vagabonds. But understand, you Northerners are a constant irritation to the people here. It appears to me that home rule will prevail.
Lawlessness in the South was an active concern of the North. The Republican Congress' first Reconstruction Act in March of 1867 organized 10 southern states into 5 military districts. Each district was to be commanded by a general. Military rule prevailed so to protect the freedmen and Republican sympathizers. Southern states could regain their constitutional powers and end military rule only under certain conditions. The states had to hold constitutional conventions to set up their state government. They had to ratify the 14th Amendment, and they had to guarantee freedmen the right to vote. Congress, controlled by Republicans, welcomed the new black voters who nearly always registered as Republicans. 700,000 ex-slaves qualified as voters. Before Reconstruction, it was against the law for a slave to read. Now they were a part of the political system. President Johnson, however, disagreed with Congress's plan to quickly offer blacks these rights of citizenship. For 3 years, Congress and Johnson battled politically over the direction of government and Reconstruction of the South.
Time after time, President Johnson has continued to challenge the authority of Congress by trying to hinder every effort made to enforce the Reconstruction policy. Just the other day, he tried to fire Secretary of War Edward Stanton. Clearly, this is a violation of the Tenure of Office Act. And by now, it is also clear that he will do nothing to support the freedmen in getting their rights. These acts are truly misuse of the presidency.
Nevertheless, I hear that the investigating committee has found President Johnson was not guilty of any high crime or misdemeanor.
Our Republican Party will do everything in our power to remove Johnson from office.
Your Republican Party are considered radicals. We more moderates from the other house, although concerned, choose not to press this matter so vigorously as you radicals.
Each and every day, Negroes are being threatened, injured, and even murdered. This bloodied shirt belonged to a young male Negro just 3 days ago who was murdered simply because he had more mules than a white man. These acts continue, and President Johnson does nothing to stop them. It is time that we give President Johnson the ultimate humiliation. We must impeach him and remove him from office.
Mr. Senator Ross, how say you? Not guilty.
In May of 1868, Andrew Johnson was impeached and came within one vote in the Senate of being removed from office. The country was spared the injury of removing Johnson from office, yet in the end, the president had lost the confidence of his countrymen. Later that year, the popular general, Ulysses S. Grant, was chosen to be the 18th President of the United States.
Finally, in 1870, Congress ratified the 15th Amendment.
It prohibited denial of the right to vote because of race or previous servitude. Beverly Nash, a former slave, expressed well the views of many uneducated Americans who recognized their new constitutional right to vote.
I believe, my friends and fellow citizens, that we are not prepared for the suffrage, but in time we can learn. Give a man tools and let him commence to use them, and in time he shall learn a trade. So it is with voting. We may not understand it at the start, but in time we shall learn to do our duty.
In 1869, Hiram Revels of Mississippi became the first black U.S. Senator. Eventually, 22 blacks became members of Congress. On the home front, Reconstruction influenced the state's political events. During the winter of 1867 to 1868, 10 southern states held state constitutional conventions. Since most of the political leaders of the South were part of the Confederacy and considered traitors, they could not participate in designing the state's principles and framework of government. Therefore, the delegates to these conventions were dedicated blacks of the Republican Party, along with anti-secessionist whites from the South known as scalawags, and bold whites from the North known as carpetbaggers. Together, they wrote good constitutions for each of their states, which provided for public schools and equal rights for all of the state's citizens, regardless of race. As the states approved their new constitutions and the 14th Amendment, they were readmitted back into the United States with full states' rights. In 1866, Tennessee was readmitted into the Union. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, and Louisiana were readmitted during the year of 1868. Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas were readmitted by 1870. During Reconstruction, there was not only political changes in the South, but changes in the economy as well. Cotton, tobacco, and sugar production slowly grew to quantities beyond expectations. Rising from ashes loomed up cotton mills, railroads, and iron foundries. As the New South showed itself as an economic opportunity, more and more Northerners arrived with their capital, as well as their lust for easy money. Carrying no more than a carpet sack or suitcase, many carpetbaggers were not only known for meddling in politics, but were also known for committing fraud, bribery, and hoaxes that helped them to confiscate sums up to hundreds of thousands of dollars from states who already had small treasuries.
The state is desperate, Mr. Clark. The war has depleted our treasury sorely, and the state is in great need of making money.
Governor, I'm very well informed on the South's poor condition.
The state legislature has issued over $1 million for railroad purposes. The Springfield Railroad line must provide transportation to and from our coal mines. Now, a good railway system is critical for us to get that coal to our market.
Governor, that's just a small part of the whole picture. In addition, your state will reap a handsome tax revenue from increased profits at the mines, and you'll be putting thousands of citizens to work. With your re-election coming up, that's sure to mean more votes for you. What you need is my expertise in building a railway line that'll rival those in the best northern states.
But can I be assured that you have the qualifications to complete this project?
As president of the Catham Railroad, I have an impeccable reputation. In fact, I and several Wall Street brokers are expanding a railroad line at this very moment for the state of North Carolina. Have the state's assembly issue me the $1 million, and I will solve all of your problems.
3 weeks later, Mr. Clark was issued $1 million. Unfortunately for the state of Alabama, Mr. Clark never intended to complete the railway project. He cashed in the state's money and soon declared bankruptcy. Leaving for regions unknown, he was never to be seen again.
Not to let their home state be ruled by freedmen, scalawags, and carpetbaggers, many secret societies evolved to stop this progress of Reconstruction. Based on the concept of white supremacy, thousands of respectable and not so respectable white citizens disguised themselves and rode at night to beat, whip, or lynch the blacks and whites promoting Reconstruction. Defending themselves as peacekeepers, horrible, violent crimes were committed by these groups known as Knights of the White Camellia, the White Brotherhood, or the Ku Klux Klan. In spite of the racism prevailing in the South, many blacks accepted the challenges of citizenship and endeavored to make a living. Many tried to find land offered by the Homestead Act.
40 acres and a mule were promised to us, but rarely delivered. Some properties in the South were given to us freedmen, but most of the land available was poor and no good.
Eventually, some blacks sought the open frontier in the West, finding free land available to homesteaders. As the years of Reconstruction passed, the South became more determined to take control and to end Reconstruction. Blacks were intimidated to not vote. Federal troops grew weary to protect civil rights, and many Northerners lost interest in reforming their Southern neighbors. During the 1876 presidential election between Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel J. Tilden, a dispute occurred questioning who had won. To settle the question, Southern Democrats agreed to let the Republican Hayes be president under the condition that all federal troops be removed from the South. This 1877 bargain brought an end to Reconstruction and the freedoms of blacks. Nevertheless, the ideals of Reconstruction were now secured in the Constitution. These amendments later helped lawmakers attack the injustices of prejudice and rightfully defend the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. During Reconstruction, the slaves were freed. A president was assassinated. Civil rights were protected. Johnson's impeachment failed. States were reunited. Freedmen voted. White supremacists terrorized. And Southern states returned to home rule. Major John William DeForest of the Freedmen's Bureau aptly expressed the lessons learned from the Civil War and Reconstruction. These are his words.
For the sake of the entire Republic, we should endeavor to make our citizens feel that they are Americans and nothing but Americans. Let us remember the fact
that no section of the community can be injured without injuring the other sections, that the perfect prosperity of the whole depends upon the prosperity of all the parts.
By learning from the mistakes of the past, hopefully Americans shall grow in knowledge and seek a better America for tomorrow. Fill in the blanks. Number 1. President Lincoln's plan to peacefully return the 11 Confederate states back into the Union was called... Number 2. Was a type of work often offered to blacks in the South. Number 3. According to the radical Republicans, it was who should have the power to reconstruct the South, not the president. Number 4. The 13th Amendment prohibited Number 5. In 1866, the 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship to... Number 6. The Freedmen's Bureau helped people from both races with... Number 7. 10 southern states were organized into 5 districts to protect the freedmen and Republican sympathizers. True or false? Number 8. Andrew Johnson came within 1 vote of being removed from the presidency. Number 9. Many carpetbaggers came to the South for political and financial purposes. Number 10. Many Southerners formed secret societies to prevent black Americans from enjoying the rights of citizenship.